I don't know why I decided to sell it. Maybe it was because everything else was falling apart and this was the only thing left I had control over. Maybe it was because, after Annette died, it felt like there was nothing left to hold on to. It had been our dream, that apartment, our home. But once she was gone, it felt empty in a way I couldn't bear. Still, I never expected it to hit me like this. I sat alone in the living room, the same room where we had spent so many nights talking, laughing, loving. It was dark outside, but I didn't bother turning on the lights. The only illumination came from the streetlights casting shadows through the blinds, making everything feel distant. The apartment was nearly empty now. There was nothing left except the echo of its past. The pictures of Annette and me were packed away, the furniture sold off. The bare walls seemed to echo her absence more than anything. I could still smell her perfume, faintly, lingering in the air, like she had just walked past. I closed my eyes and let myself feel it for a moment, wishing I could turn back time, wishing I could bring her back. But I couldn't. I heard the phone ring from the kitchen, its shrill sound cutting through the stillness. I didn't want to answer. I didn't want to speak to anyone. But I knew I had to. Thomas had been calling more often lately. At first, I thought it was just to check in, to see how I was doing, but something about his voice had changed. It was harder now, colder, even when he pretended everything was fine. I grabbed the phone off the counter and saw his name flash on the screen. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't feel the rush of love or excitement I usually felt when I saw his name. All I felt was guilt. I hadn't spoken to him properly in weeks. The last time we really talked was when I told him about the sale of the apartment. He wasn't happy. Not that I expected him to be, but I didn't expect him to be this angry. "Hey, Dad," his voice came through, low and tight. "Hey, son," I said, my throat tight, trying to keep the tone casual. I had no idea what he was going to say. He was silent for a beat. "You sold the apartment," he finally said. The words were sharp like knives. I winced, the guilt swelling in my chest. "Yeah," I said, my voice faltering slightly. "I needed to, Thomas. It wasn't the same without her. You know that. I just couldn't be there anymore." "Why didn't you wait for me?" His voice cracked and it made my stomach drop. "Why didn't you talk to me first? We had plans, Dad. Sarah and I, we." "Plans?" I cut in, my voice rising without meaning to. "What plans? What could I possibly do with that place? The memories were choking me, Thomas. I couldn't live there anymore." There was another long silence. I could hear him breathing on the other end, like he was trying to control himself. Finally, he spoke again, his voice low and tight with anger. "It's not just about you, Dad. You didn't just sell a place. You sold our memories. You took everything from me." My heart stopped. The words hit me harder than anything else I'd heard in a long time. I didn't know what to say. I was justifying my decision to myself, telling myself I was doing the right thing. But hearing it from Thomas, hearing how much it hurt him, shattered me in a way I hadn't expected. "I didn't mean to hurt you," I said quietly, my voice thick with regret. "I thought it was the right choice. I thought maybe it would be easier for me." "You thought," Thomas repeated, his voice laced with bitterness. "What about me? Did you even think about what this would do to me?" I opened my mouth to respond, but I couldn't find the words. What could I say? That I thought I was protecting him by getting rid of the apartment? That I thought he would understand why I had to do it? But deep down, I knew I hadn't thought about him at all. I hadn't considered how much that place meant to him, how much it meant to both of us. "I don't know why you couldn't just wait for me," he said, his voice breaking now. "I would have come, I would have helped, but no, you just sold it behind my back." "I was trying to move on," I whispered. I didn't even know if he could hear me, but it was the truth. I had been trying to move on. I thought maybe if I could sell the apartment, if I could let go of everything tied to Annette, I could finally breathe again. But instead, all I did was push my son away. "You don't get it," Thomas said, his voice hollow. "You don't get how much it hurts. That apartment was all we had left of her, all I had left of Mom. You took it from me." I could hear the tears in his voice now, and they cut through me like nothing else. The guilt that had been swirling inside me for days now felt like it was suffocating me. I had destroyed the last piece of Annette we both had left. I had taken it from him without a second thought. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but it didn't feel like enough. It wasn't enough. The silence stretched between us for what felt like an eternity. I didn't know what to say next, how to fix this. I had already made my choice, and I couldn't take it back. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice quieter now, the anger fatting into something else, something colder. "I need some time, Dad. I need some space. I can't talk to you right now." I wanted to tell him I understood, to tell him that I was here whenever he was ready to talk. But I knew I couldn't fix this. Not now, not like this. All right, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Take all the time you need. I'm here when you're ready. He hung up before I could say anything else. I stared at the phone in my hand, feeling like a failure. The apartment was gone, and with it, my son's trust in me. What had I done? How had it all gone so wrong? I sank back into the couch, the weight of my regret pressing down on me. The apartment, the memories, everything I had thought I was holding on to, none of it mattered now. What I had left was a shattered relationship with my son, a relationship I didn't know how to fix. I glanced around the empty room, feeling a deep, aching void inside. The silence in the apartment was deafening now, and I couldn't escape it. The walls that had once been filled with warmth and laughter now seemed cold, indifferent. I thought I could move on, that selling the apartment would give me some peace. But peace wasn't what I found. What I found was a loss that ran deeper than I ever could have imagined. A loss of a place, yes, but more importantly, a loss of connection, of love. I closed my eyes and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. It wasn't the apartment that had kept us together, it was the people. And I had lost them. I didn't know what would come next. All I knew was that the journey I had started, in my attempt to move forward, had left me standing alone in the ruins of what used to be my life. And now, I had no idea how to rebuild. It's strange how the past has a way of slipping through your fingers, like sand in the wind. Sometimes I try to hold on to it, grasp onto the moments that felt so vivid and real when they were happening. But now, they slip away as quickly as they come, leaving behind only a faint memory of what once was. I think about Annette every day, not in some abstract way, but in the most tangible, real ways. The smell of her perfume still clings to my shirts in the back of the closet. Her favorite chair is still in the corner, the one she used to curl up in with a book, her glasses perched on the tip of her nose. It's a chair that seems to hold all her presence, even now, though I know she's not coming back to sit in it. And then there's the sound, the way her laughter used to fill every room, echoing off the walls. That was before everything changed, before the illness, before I lost her. We bought the apartment together, Annette and I. It wasn't a grand place, nothing fancy, but it was ours. The kind of place that felt like a fresh start. I remember the day we moved in, the two of us hauling boxes up the stairs, laughing about how we had too much stuff for such a small space. Annette had a way of making everything feel light, even when the weight of life threatened to pull us down. She wasn't just my wife. She was my partner, my rock, the person who knew me better than anyone else. I loved her fiercely, but I took her for granted, and I see that now. The apartment was a dream for us, a place we could finally call our own. It wasn't perfect, there were cracks in the walls, and the kitchen was small, but we made it work. We painted the walls together, picking out colors that felt like us. We joked about how it was just the beginning of a life we'd build together, one step at a time. It was our sanctuary. Then came the sickness. At first, it was small things, easily ignored. A cough that wouldn't go away. A fatigue that seemed out of place. But over time, it became harder to deny. Annette, the woman who once filled the apartment with energy and life, began to shrink. She became weaker, paler. The sparkle in her eyes slowly dulled. I remember the first time she had to sit down after climbing the stairs, gasping for air. My heart broke in that moment. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of the end. I couldn't accept it. Not at first. I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad. We'd been through hard times before. We'd weathered storms, survived losses. This would pass, I convinced myself. But it didn't. It got worse. She was diagnosed with a chronic illness that slowly drained the life from her. It was a battle she couldn't win, no matter how hard she tried. As her health deteriorated, so did everything else. The apartment became a reminder of what was slipping away. Every room felt like it was closing in on me. The walls seemed to get smaller. The air felt thick with the weight of unspoken fears. Annette wasn't the same woman she used to be. She couldn't be, but neither could I. I tried to hold it all together. I took care of her, tried to make her comfortable, but there was always that hollow feeling, like I was losing something or someone more than just her health. I was losing us. And then there was Thomas, my son. He was in his 20s by then, building his own life with Sarah, his wife. He wasn't around as much as I would have liked, but I couldn't blame him. He had his own responsibilities, his own future to think about. I'd always tried to be the kind of father who gave him space, who didn't cling too tightly. I didn't want him to feel burdened by me or by Annette's illness. But there were times when the pain was too much, when I would find myself wishing he were here by my side. He was my son, my flesh and blood. And yet, as the months dragged on, I felt like we were drifting further apart. Annette used to complain about how little Thomas came to visit. She'd say things like, "Your son is too busy for his mother." It stung, but I understood. I didn't want to burden him with the reality of what was happening here. He was young, just starting his life. He didn't need to carry the weight of our struggles. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel like he was slipping away from us. Every phone call, every visit became more and more distant, and I couldn't blame him. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, it became harder for me to keep up the facade. I was exhausted. I was grieving every day, watching the woman I loved wither away, helpless to stop it. The apartment, which had once felt so full of life, now felt like a grave. I couldn't breathe in it anymore. The silence was deafening. The loneliness was suffocating. And then, when Annette passed away, quietly, peacefully, as if she had been waiting for the right moment, I was left in that apartment alone. Alone with my grief. Alone with my memories. The days after her death were a blur. I kept moving through the motions, handling the funeral arrangements, sorting through her things, but all of it felt like someone else's life, not mine. It was like I was in a fog, walking through a world that didn't make sense anymore. But the one thing I knew for sure was that I couldn't stay in that apartment. It was too much. Too many reminders of her, of what I had lost. Too many memories of things that would never be again. I didn't talk to Thomas about it right away. I told myself that I'd figure it out on my own, that I could make this decision for both of us. But deep down, I knew that wasn't fair. I knew that Thomas had a right to be part of the decision-making process. He was her son, too. He had a right to the memories, to the home we had shared for so many years. But I didn't tell him. I just made the decision. The apartment was sold. It felt like the only way to breathe again, to let go. I convinced myself that it was the right thing to do, that selling it would help me heal, that it would give me closure. But when I saw Thomas's face on the other end of the phone, when I heard the anger and hurt in his voice, I realized just how wrong I was. I hadn't thought about him at all. I had made this decision alone, just like I'd been doing for months. I had pushed him away without even realizing it. The apartment wasn't just a place for me, it was a place for him, too. It was where he had grown up, where he had laughed and played as a child. It was his home, just as much as it was mine. And now it was gone. I stood in the living room of that empty apartment, the silence pressing in around me. The decision was made. There was no turning back, but I felt an emptiness inside me that I couldn't explain. It wasn't just the loss of the apartment, it was the loss of something much deeper. It was the loss of the family we had been, the family I had taken for granted. It was the realization that, in my attempt to move on, I had hurt the one person who meant the most to me, my son. I had sold our past, and in doing so, I had destroyed the future we could have had together. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure if there was any way to fix it. The days after Annette's funeral blurred together in a haze of grief. I moved through them like I was walking underwater, everything muffled and distant. The weight of her absence was constant, always pressing down on me. Her side of the bed was untouched, the pillow still indented where she had rested her head. Her perfume lingered on the bathroom towels. The living room, the place where we had spent so many evenings, watching old movies or talking about our dreams, felt unbearably empty. The silence felt like a suffocating blanket, when I couldn't pull off no matter how hard I tried. I didn't know how to fill the space. I couldn't stop hearing her voice, even though she wasn't there to speak anymore. It was as if the air itself remembered her, carrying the echo of her words, her laughter, her very presence. But that was all it was, an echo, a memory. And that memory was all that remained in the apartment that now felt like a mausoleum of everything I had lost. I didn't talk to Thomas much after that. He called every now and then, but it was never for long. Each time he asked if I was okay, I would give him some vague answer, brushing aside the truth. I was okay. I hadn't been okay for months, but I didn't know how to admit it to him. I wanted him to think I had it together, that I was coping. I wanted him to believe that I didn't need him in the way that I actually did. But it wasn't just my loss that I was dealing with, it was the loss of us, the loss of our family. Thomas had always been my pride and joy. I had watched him grow from a curious, mischievous child into a man with his own life, his own ambitions, and I was proud of him, more proud than I could ever express. But over the years, it felt like we had grown further apart, especially after he married Sarah. It wasn't that I didn't like her. I did, in fact, I thought she was a good woman. But I missed the days when it was just Thomas and me. When we could have conversations late at night, when he would tell me everything, no secrets. But Sarah came into his life, and suddenly those late-night talks became fewer. I didn't blame her for that, but I couldn't help but feel like I was losing him. Slowly, but surely, he was slipping away from me. When Annette's health began to decline, Thomas was busy. He had his own life, his own problems, and I didn't want to burden him with the reality of what was happening here. I told him everything was fine, that his mother was doing okay, that I had things under control. He was busy with work, his wife, and I didn't want to drag him into our chaos. But in doing so, I shut him out. And when Annette's condition worsened, I shut myself in, too. I didn't want to face him. I didn't want him to see me falling apart. I didn't want him to see his father helpless, unable to save the woman he loved. The guilt of that decision haunts me now, in the quiet of this empty apartment. I had always tried to be a strong father for Thomas. I tried to give him the space he needed to become his own man, to let him make his own choices. But I did it at the expense of our relationship. I made myself distant. I told myself I was doing the right thing by not burdening him, by letting him live his life. But the truth was, I was pushing him away, and I didn't even realize it. The silence between us grew, and before long, it became a chasm I didn't know how to cross. When Annette died, Thomas came to the funeral, but he was distant. He said the right things, as we all do at funerals, but I could feel the walls between us. I could see it in his eyes, the confusion, the hurt. I had shut him out for so long that now, when I needed him most, I didn't know how to reach him. We both knew that the bond we had shared when he was a child was fading. It had already started to fade before Annette's illness, but after her death, it felt like it was gone completely. I thought maybe selling the apartment would help me heal, that it would allow me to let go of the past, to move forward. I kept telling myself it was the right thing to do, but deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. It wasn't about the apartment. It wasn't about the memories I was trying to escape. It was about Annette. It was about everything I had lost. I didn't tell Thomas about the sale right away. I kept putting it off, thinking I could figure it out by myself. Maybe I was trying to protect him from the pain of losing that last connection to his mother. But in doing so, I made the mistake of making the decision alone. I sold the apartment without even consulting him. I didn't even ask if he wanted to keep anything from it, anything that might remind him of her. It was a decision I made in the midst of my own grief, thinking I was doing the right thing. But it was a decision I would come to regret more than any other. The day I told him about the sale was the day everything changed. I had been expecting some kind of reaction, but not like this. His voice on the other end of the phone was filled with disbelief, with hurt. "Why'd you sell it without telling me?" he had asked, his tone flat but sharp with pain. "That apartment was more than just a place to live, Dad. It was a part of us. It was a part of Mom, and now it's gone. You took that from me." I was stunned. I had thought that, by getting rid of the apartment, I was cutting the ties that bound me to the past. But in doing so, I had cut the ties between me and my son. I hadn't considered how much that place had meant to him. I hadn't thought about how it was his last connection to his mother, to our family. The pain in his voice was unbearable, and I realized then how deeply I had hurt him. I had sold the apartment without even thinking about what it meant to him. I had been so consumed by my own need to escape the pain that I had hurt the one person who mattered most. The conversation ended abruptly, with him telling me he needed time to think. But what did I need time for? I already knew I had screwed up. There was no taking back the decision, no undoing the damage. The apartment was gone. My connection to him, to her, was gone. For the next few weeks, Thomas and I barely spoke. There were awkward phone calls, strained attempts at communication. But the space between us grew wider and wider with each passing day. And no matter how hard I tried to fill it, I couldn't. I had pushed him away too far. I had made too many mistakes. I had lost the one thing I didn't want to lose, the relationship with my son. I couldn't go back and change it. I couldn't undo the things I had done. I could only live with the consequences. And the consequences were staring me in the face every day as I sat in this empty apartment, trying to breathe, trying to survive. I had thought that selling the apartment would give me peace, that it would help me let go of the past. But all it had done was create a new kind of pain. A pain that wasn't just about the loss of Annette, but about the loss of my son. A pain that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. The days that followed were unbearable. I thought the emptiness of the apartment would swallow me whole, but nothing was as suffocating as the silence between Thomas and me. I had hoped, deep down, that we could find a way back to each other. That time would heal the wounds, that the distance would lessen. But as each day passed, it became clear that I was wrong. The rift between us wasn't something that could be fixed with a simple conversation or a quick apology. It was deeper than that, rooted in years of miscommunication and choices made in isolation. I hadn't realized just how much I had shut Thomas out over the years, how much I had pushed him away in the name of being strong, of being independent, of thinking I was protecting him by keeping him at arm's length. It was only now, after the apartment was gone, after the last tangible connection to Annette had disappeared, that I understood the weight of that distance. It wasn't just a matter of an apartment or a place, it was about losing the foundation of our family. The very thing that had once kept us anchored. And now, there was nothing but a hole, an abyss between us. I spent days packing around the apartment, staring at the walls, trying to gather the courage to call him again. But every time I thought about picking up the phone, a wave of anxiety washed over me. What could I say to him? What words could possibly fix this? There was no way to undo the damage I had done. And more than anything, I didn't know if I could ever look him in the eye again. The shame of my decisions, my selfishness, weighed on me like a heavy cloak that I couldn't shed. The phone calls, when they did happen, were brief and strained. Thomas didn't want to talk about the apartment anymore. He didn't want to talk about the past. He was distant, and every word he spoke felt like a reminder of the gap that had formed between us. I could hear the resentment in his voice, but I didn't know how to bridge the divide. I didn't know how to fix it. I was a father who had let his son down in the worst way imaginable, and now the weight of that failure was suffocating me. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't give up. I kept telling myself that I would find a way to fix this. That maybe, if I tried hard enough, I could reach him. But the more I tried, the more it felt like I was chasing something that had already slipped through my fingers. Then, a week after the phone call where Thomas had yelled at me for selling the apartment, he showed up. I didn't know he was coming. There had been no warning, no call to let me know he was on his way. But suddenly, the doorbell rang, and when I opened it, there he was, standing in front of me with Sarah beside him. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the same tired look he had worn when he was a child after a long day at school, but there was something else now, something harder. He looked at me for a moment, his face unreadable, and then stepped inside without saying a word. Sarah followed, her expression soft but filled with a kind of uncertainty. I don't know what I expected, but it certainly wasn't this. I stood in the doorway, frozen, unsure of what to do or say. The silence between us felt suffocating, like the air had thickened with unspoken words. It was a silence that spoke volumes. And then, finally, Thomas broke it. "Where is it?" His voice was flat, emotionless. I blinked confused. Where? What? "The stuff, the things that were left in the apartment, where are they?" His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was as if the reality of what I had done slammed into me all over again. "I sold everything," I said quietly. "There wasn't much left. You sold everything," Thomas interrupted, his voice sharp now, his anger resurfacing. "You didn't even ask me what I wanted. You didn't think I'd want something to remember her by?" His eyes were bright with frustration, his jaw clenched. I felt a pang of guilt, deep in my chest. He was right. I hadn't even thought about asking him what he wanted, what memories he wanted to keep. In my haste to move on, to let go of everything, I hadn't considered how much it would hurt him. "I didn't know how to," I began, but he cut me off again. "You didn't know how to, Dad? You didn't know how to ask? You just assumed I didn't care." His voice was rising now, the raw emotions spilling over. "That apartment was all we had left of her. You just threw it away. And now, there's nothing left but empty space." I swallowed hard, trying to find the right words, but none came. What could I say? That I thought selling it was the only way to move forward, that I couldn't live with the memories? None of it felt like enough. Nothing felt like enough. Sarah spoke up then, her voice soft but firm. "Thomas, stop," she said gently, placing a hand on his arm. "Let's sit down and talk about this." She turned to me, her eyes filled with sympathy, but there was also an edge of concern there. "It's not just about the apartment, right? It's about everything else. The distance, the things that haven't been said." Thomas's eyes flicked to Sarah, then back to me, his face hard with anger and hurt. But after a moment, he nodded and sank down onto the couch. Sarah followed suit, sitting beside him. I stood there, uncertain of how to proceed, but Sarah's gaze softened. She motioned for me to sit, and reluctantly I did. We all sat in silence for a long time. The room was thick with unspoken words, with everything that had built up over the years and finally come to the surface. Finally, it was Thomas who spoke, though his voice was quieter now. "You sold the apartment because you couldn't bear to live there anymore, right?" His words were slow, as if he were testing them out, trying to make sense of everything. "I get that. I get that it was hard, but what I don't get is why you didn't talk to me. Why didn't you tell me how you were feeling?" I didn't know how to answer that. I had been so consumed by my own grief, my own need to escape the pain, that I hadn't stopped to think about how much I was shutting him out. I hadn't stopped to think about how much he needed me, too. I thought I was protecting you, I said, my voice shaky. I thought that if I just handled it on my own, if I didn't drag you into it, you wouldn't have to carry the weight of it. I didn't want to burden you. Thomas's gaze softened just a little. You didn't have to protect me, Dad. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm your son. I wanted to be there. I wanted to help. But you didn't give me that chance. The words hit me like a freight train, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I had thought I was being noble, shielding him from the burden of loss. But in doing so, I had pushed him away. I had isolated myself, and worse, I had isolated him too. I'm sorry, I whispered, the words feeling too small, too inadequate for everything I had done. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought I was doing what was best. Thomas was quiet for a long time. I didn't know if he was angry still, or if he was just processing everything. But when he spoke again, his voice was calm, the edge of anger gone. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, he said, but you did, and it's not just about the apartment. It's about everything that's been left unsaid, everything that's been left between us. His words lingered in the air, and I finally understood. It wasn't just about the apartment. It wasn't just about the things I had sold or the memories I had erased. It was about the years of silence. The years of pretending everything was fine when it was. The years I had spent trying to protect him by keeping him at arm's length, and in doing so, losing him. I can't fix the past, I said quietly, but I'm here now, and I want to fix this. I want to make it right. Thomas looked at me for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then, finally, he nodded. We'll see, he said, his voice quiet, but it wasn't a dismissal. It wasn't a rejection. It was the first step toward rebuilding, toward healing. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But at least now, for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was hope. And that, for me, was enough. The silence between Thomas and me wasn't something I could easily bridge. After that confrontation, after the harsh words and the undeniable truths that had been said, I knew that healing wasn't going to come quickly. It would take time. But even that simple acknowledgement, his willingness to sit with me and talk, to not shut me out completely, was something I clung to. Days passed and things didn't magically improve. It wasn't like the movies where everything comes together in a perfect scene after one emotional confrontation. In reality, it was messier, slower, and more painful. I tried to talk to him more, but he was distant, reserved. And I couldn't blame him. After all that had happened, after everything I had done, it wasn't just about saying sorry and expecting it to be enough. We started communicating in small ways. Short phone calls, quick texts. He still hadn't come back to the apartment, and I didn't push him to. The few times I had seen him in person since that day, he'd been polite, but there was still an invisible wall between us, taller than any I had ever seen. It was like living in a house where the foundation was cracked, but you were too afraid to fix it, because once you started, you might realize the whole thing would come crashing down. I thought about Annette often, even more now that the apartment was sold. She had always been the glue that held us together. When she was healthy, it was easy. We were a team, a family. But once her illness started to take hold of her, the walls between Thomas and me began to build. I focused so much on caring for her, on keeping everything from falling apart, that I neglected the very relationship I needed to protect the most. It had always been easy to get lost in the routine of caring for Annette, to lose myself in the motions of checking her vitals, organizing the appointments, picking up prescriptions. It was a full-time job, and I let it consume me. And in doing that, I let everything else fall by the wayside. I let my relationship with Thomas slip away. I didn't even notice when it happened. He was still there, yes, but not really there. Not in the way he used to be. We didn't talk about anything real anymore. We didn't share the same space like we used to. It was like we were just two people living under the same roof, each in our own world. When Annette died, it was as if that final thread that had bound us together snapped. Thomas left not long after the funeral. He went back to his life, back to Sarah and their home, and I stayed here in this apartment alone. The silence was deafening. I would think back on the times we had spent together before all of this. The birthdays, the holidays, the simple moments of sitting on the couch together, laughing over stupid things. It felt like a lifetime ago. A few weeks after the confrontation, I decided to reach out to him again. I couldn't let it end like this. I couldn't let my son slip further away from me. I was terrified that I had already lost him for good. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one evening, the dim light from the lamp overhead casting shadows on the walls. I had my phone in front of me, my thumb hovering over the number I had saved for Thomas. I wasn't sure what I wanted to say. It felt like the words were stuck in my throat, and every time I tried to speak them, They got tangled in my mind. But I had to try, for him, for me, for us. I dialed his number and held the phone to my ear. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited for him to pick up. The seconds stretched into what felt like minutes. And then, finally, I heard the sound of him answering on the other end. "Hello," his voice was guarded, distant, but I could hear the exhaustion in it, the weariness that seemed to live there now. "Thomas," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's me, can we talk?" There was a long pause before he spoke. "What do you want to talk about, Dad?" I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to calm the storm inside me. I had to be honest. I had to say the things that I had been avoiding for so long. "I want to talk about us," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you and I can't undo any of it. But I want to try to fix things, Thomas. I don't want to lose you. I don't want you to be angry with me anymore." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. I couldn't tell if he was angry or if he was just exhausted. Maybe both. "I don't know if you can fix it, Dad," he said quietly. "You can't just sell our memories and expect everything to be okay. It's not that simple. It's not just about the apartment. It's about everything you've done. About how you shut me out when Mom was sick and how you thought I didn't care. I was your son, Dad, and you left me on the outside." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had failed him in ways I hadn't fully understood until now. "I'm sorry," I whispered, the words barely audible. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I was just pushing you away." "You didn't protect me," Thomas said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You pushed me away when I needed you most, and now everything's broken, and I don't know if I can fix it. I don't know if I even want to try." The pain in his words was unbearable, but I couldn't give up, not on him, not on us. "I understand," I said, swallowing hard. "I understand if you need time. I understand if you're angry. But please just know that I'm here, and I'll be here whenever you're ready. I don't want to lose you, Thomas. I can't lose you." There was another long pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end, and for a moment I thought he was going to hang up. But then he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Dad," he said, the weight of those words sinking deep into my chest. "But I'm not ready to give up on us yet. I need time." I felt a small flicker of hope, like a tiny light in the dark. "I'll wait. However long it takes, I'll wait." He didn't say anything after that. He just hung up. But in that silence, I felt something shift. It wasn't a resolution, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. A crack that, if I was patient enough, could turn into something real, something worth rebuilding. In the days that followed, I gave him the space he needed. I didn't push. I didn't try to fix everything all at once. I just waited. And I thought about all the things I had done wrong. I thought about all the things I could do better. And I realized that healing wasn't just about making apologies. It was about showing up. It was about being there for him when he was ready. It wasn't easy. I couldn't force Thomas to forgive me. I couldn't rush the process. But I knew that as long as I kept showing up, no matter how long it took, there was a chance. A chance to rebuild the trust we had lost. A chance to heal. And that was enough for me. It had to be. Because I wasn't ready to lose him, not yet. And if I had to wait the rest of my life to make things right, then that was what I would do. There was no easy solution to what had happened, no quick fixes, but I believed, deep in my heart, that one day we would find our way back to each other. Slowly, piece by piece, we would rebuild what had been broken. And that thought, that flicker of hope, was the only thing that kept me going. The only thing that made all the pain and the regret feel just a little bit more bearable. It had been a month since that phone call with Thomas. A month since I finally admitted the extent of my failures, my mistakes, my selfishness. And yet, each day felt like a struggle. I had hoped that after the confrontation, things would somehow improve. But I was wrong. The silence remained, and it grew louder with every passing day. The gap between Thomas and me wasn't something I could easily mend. It wasn't something that could be fixed with words or even time. It was something that had to be rebuilt, piece by piece. One painful, excruciating step at a time. I spent the next few weeks in a sort of limbo. I had resolved to give Thomas the space he needed, but there were moments when the loneliness, the regret, and the heartache would almost overwhelm me. I spent my days in the empty apartment, staring at the walls, trying to remember the times when this place had felt alive with warmth, with laughter, with Annette. I wanted to hold on to those memories, to keep them close, but the more I clung to them, the more they slipped through my fingers. They felt distant, fatting, like shadows in the corners of my mind. I didn't know what I was waiting for anymore. I didn't know if Thomas would ever come around, but I couldn't give up. I couldn't just let it all slip away, not when there was still a chance. I spent most evenings sitting on the couch, my hands restless as I picked up random things around the apartment, photos of Annette and me, pieces of her jewelry I had packed away, old letters. Every item felt like a reminder of everything I had lost. I ran my fingers over the edges of the photograph of us on our wedding day. She had looked so radiant then, so full of life. And I had been so certain that we would grow old together. I had taken so much for granted. My mind wandered back to the days when we first moved into this apartment. I remember how excited we had been. Annette had been full of dreams for the future, and we had spent hours talking about how we would turn this place into our home. We painted the walls together, choosing colors that felt warm and welcoming. I remember laughing with her as we argued over which shade of green would be best for the kitchen. There was a simplicity to those moments, a joy that I hadn't fully appreciated at the time. But I had been too busy with everything else. Too busy with work, with life, with the never-ending tasks that filled up my days. And then Annette's illness had come, and I had thrown myself into caring for her. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was being a good husband. But in doing so, I had pulled away from the one person who needed me most, my son. I hadn't realized how much Thomas had been hurting. I hadn't realized how much he had needed me, too. He was my son, my flesh and blood, and I had shut him out. I had focused on Annette, on the constant worry about her health, and I had neglected the most important relationship in my life. I had taken him for granted, and now I was paying the price. There was a knock at the door one afternoon, and my heart jumped. It was strange, this sense of hope I felt whenever I heard a knock now. I had grown accustomed to the silence, to the isolation. But this felt different. I stood up quickly and walked to the door, my pulse racing in my chest. When I opened it, there stood Thomas. For a moment, neither of us said anything. He looked older somehow. There were lines around his eyes, and his hair was a little longer than I remembered, but it was still him, still my son. He didn't step inside right away. He stood there, his hands shoved into his pockets, his eyes focused on the ground. He looked like he didn't know what to say either. I wasn't sure if he was here to yell at me again, or if he was here to finally give me the chance to make things right. "I'm sorry," I said, breaking the silence before he could. "For everything, for shutting you out, for not being the father you needed me to be. I didn't realize what I was doing, Thomas, but I see it now. I see how much I've hurt you." Thomas didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked at me with those eyes that held so much hurt, so much confusion. He was still angry. I could see it in the tightness of his jaw, the way he held himself. But there was something else there too, something softer, a hesitation. "I know you're sorry, Dad," he said, his voice quiet. "But sorry doesn't fix everything. It doesn't make it better. It doesn't make the last year go away." His eyes met mine then, and for the first time I saw the vulnerability in them. The anger was still there, but it was mixed with something else, something I hadn't seen before. "I know it doesn't," I said, feeling my chest tight. "But I need you to know that I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere, Thomas. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right, even if it takes time. I know I can't undo the past, but I'll be here. I'll be the father you need me to be." He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he stepped inside, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could fix this. Maybe there was a chance. We sat down at the kitchen table, the same place where Annette and I had sat so many times. The table where we had shared meals, laughed, argued, and talked about our dreams for the future. It was strange, being here without her. But as I looked at Thomas across from me, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. A sense that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Dad," Thomas said quietly. His voice was steady, but I could hear the weight behind his words. "I don't know if I can forget everything that's happened, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can move forward." The words hit me harder than I expected. They weren't an "I forgive you" or an "I'm over it," but they were something. They were an opening, a crack in the wall that had seemed so impenetrable. I couldn't fix everything overnight, I knew that, but this was the beginning of something, the beginning of healing. "I'll take whatever you're willing to give me," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I just want to be a part of your life again, Thomas. I want to be your father. I want to fix what I've broken." He nodded slowly, his expression softening just a little. "It's not going to be easy," he said, almost to himself, "but I think we can try." We sat there for a long time, neither of us saying much, just existing in the same space. It was the most honest conversation we had had in months, maybe even years. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the resolution I had been hopping for, but it was a start. And right then, that was enough. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I thought about the conversation. I thought about the future and how uncertain it still was. I thought about the mistakes I had made, the things I had lost, and the things I might still lose. But I also thought about the possibility of what could come next. Maybe it wouldn't be easy, but maybe, just maybe, I had a chance to rebuild. I closed my eyes, feeling a small sense of peace for the first time in a long time. Maybe the road ahead would be long. Maybe it would be filled with setbacks and disappointments. But it was a road I was willing to walk. A road I had to walk because I wasn't ready to give up. Not on Thomas. Not on our family. Not on the chance to make things right. And for the first time in months, I believed that maybe, just maybe, it was possible. Few days after Thomas came over, I found myself in a strange kind of limbo. It was neither hope nor despair. It was just a place in between, where the possibility of something better lingered in the air like an unfinished thought. I was scared to believe too much, to let my heart leap too high, because I'd been disappointed before. But that quiet conversation, the one where he finally stepped back into my life just a little, had cracked open something I thought was sealed shut forever. It wasn't easy. We weren't suddenly a perfect father and son again. No, it wasn't like that. We weren't even close. But we were talking, and that in itself was something. I tried not to pressure him. I tried to be patient, to show him through actions and words that I was truly sorry for everything I had done, how I had failed him when he needed me the most. But it wasn't just about the apartment anymore. It was about the years I'd spent lost in my own world, ignoring him, thinking I was doing the right thing by protecting him from the mess of my own grief. I used to think that I could just put my head down, do the right things, keep my emotions in check, and everything would work itself out. But I had been wrong. I had ignored the simplest truth, that love is not a burden. It's not something you carry alone. It's something you share, something you hold on to together. But those thoughts didn't come easily, not at first. It took time. It took days of reflection. And honestly, those days felt like a series of tiny steps, like walking through thick fog, unsure of what lay ahead. The first sign of progress came when Thomas agreed to come over for dinner. I'd invited him several times, but every time he had politely declined, citing work or family plans. But this time he agreed. He even said he'd bring Sarah with him. I was nervous, more nervous than I had been in years, but I cooked a simple meal, nothing fancy, just pasta and a salad, hoping it would feel like a homecoming of sorts. I spent hours making sure everything was perfect, but it wasn't the food or the presentation that mattered. It was the simple act of us sitting down together at the same table. When they arrived, Sarah greeted me with a warm smile, a little too bright, as if she were trying to reassure me that things were okay. But I could see the subtle strain in her eyes. She had watched her husband suffer through the same things I had. She had seen the pain, the disappointment, the confusion that hung between us like an unspoken cloud. We sat down at the table, and for a while it was silent. Not awkward, but tentative, like we were testing the waters, unsure of how much to say or how much to reveal. I could tell Thomas wasn't quite ready to dive into deep conversation yet, and I didn't want to rush him. So we ate mostly in silence, but every now and then, Sarah would ask about something in my life, or I'd ask about Thomas's work, just simple, easy topics that didn't require too much emotional investment. It was the kind of conversation you have with people you're trying to reconnect with, when the real heart of things hasn't quite been laid bare yet. And yet, in that ordinary, quiet dinner, I felt something shift. There was a small opening. A small moment where we could almost see the bridge beginning to form again between us, though it wasn't quite strong enough to cross yet. After dinner, we sat on the couch. Thomas and I were on one side, Sarah on the other, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like we were a family again. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't the way it had been before Annette's illness, before everything had started to unravel. But it was something. "So, Dad," Thomas said, his voice quieter than usual, "how's everything been? The place, after Mom?" It was the first time he'd spoken her name in months, and I couldn't blame him for avoiding it. After all, his mother had been the glue that held us together, and losing her had broken everything apart. I cleared my throat, taking a moment before answering. "It's been harder than I thought, to be honest. The apartment, well, it's gone now. I guess that's a good thing. I'm not sure anymore, but I'm still here, still standing somehow." Thomas nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor for a moment before he looked up at me. "I get it," he said. "I know it's hard. It was hard for me, too. I never really knew what to do with all the feelings. It's like everything was just one big blur, and I was so angry I didn't know where to focus it. I didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know what to do with you." His words hung in the air, and for a moment there was a silence, thick with everything unsaid. I could feel the weight of it. And yet, for some reason, it didn't feel as suffocating as it had before. "I understand," I said quietly, my voice thick. "I know I wasn't there the way I should have been, Thomas, and I've been thinking about that a lot. Maybe I was too focused on trying to fix things on my own, trying to protect you when all you needed was me. Just me. Not my silence, not my distance. Just me. I'm sorry I failed you. I've been thinking about that every day." Thomas looked at me for a long time, and I couldn't read his expression. It was hard to tell what he was feeling, what he was thinking. But then, he did something I didn't expect. He reached out and placed a hand on mine. "I know, Dad," he said softly. "I know I'm still angry, I'm still hurt, but I think we can start over. I think we can fix this, but it's going to take time." I squeezed his hand, feeling the lump in my throat grow bigger. "I'll be here, Thomas. Whenever you're ready, no rush, no expectations, just whenever you're ready." He nodded, and I saw something in his eyes, a flicker of something that resembled hope, though it was still so small, so fragile. But it was there, and that was all I needed. Later that night, after Thomas and Sarah left, I sat alone in the apartment again, but this time it felt different. I wasn't alone in the way I had been before. Yes, Annette was gone. And yes, things were still broken between Thomas and me. But that night, I had felt a crack in the wall that had separated us. A crack that, though small, held the potential to turn into something more. Something real, something that could heal us. The days that followed weren't perfect. It wasn't like everything magically fixed itself after that dinner. Thomas still wasn't ready to jump back into the closeness we once had. There were still silences, still moments where we both felt the weight of the past pressing on us. But there were also moments of connection, of quiet understanding. Slowly, cautiously, we started to find our way back to each other. I spent the next few weeks focusing on what I could control. I started to get involved in things that mattered to me again, like volunteering at the local shelter. It wasn't much, but it was something. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was trying to live, to move forward. And every time I thought about Thomas, I thought about the fact that even though we weren't there yet, we were moving in the right direction. And that, for me, was enough. I didn't expect everything to be okay. Not yet, I knew that. But as the days passed, I realized that I didn't need it to be okay right now. I didn't need to fix everything at once. I just needed to show up. I needed to be there for him when he was ready. And little by little, we started to rebuild. Together. Slowly, carefully, but together. The road ahead was still long, but it felt less daunting now, less impossible. And maybe, just maybe, there was a future for us after all.